This is Center Stage, putting lawyers in the spotlight by highlighting attorneys and other industry experts to help take your law firm to the next level.
All right, hey everyone, I've got Tania with me today. Tania, how's your day going so far?
Amazing. How are you?
Oh, it's good. I'm excited. And we at Spotlight Branding, we actually have a couple new employees starting this week, which is kind of exciting to have this interview with you today because we're going to be talking about measuring employee performance. So who knows, I might learn a thing or two from you today and run down to Hall and tell some of our new employees that they have some new performance measurables. But I'm so excited to talk about this topic today. It's something that I'm actually really passionate about, is giving employees a way to kind of understand how they're being measured, right? And kind of defining success. So for those listening, stay tuned because at the end of this podcast, I think you're going to walk away with a better understanding of how not only you can assess employees' performance, but also how they're going to know if they're doing a good job, right? But
Yes.
before we dive into that, Tania, why don't you kind of give everyone the quick rundown of yourself? You're a lawyer. I know that. They don't know anything about you, though. So tell them about you and maybe why they should listen to you today. I know they should listen to you. But kind of give your quick background, if you will.
Okay. Well, I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for almost 17 years in Broward County, and I practice throughout Florida. I have a master's in international business law. I practice primarily with business, transactional, formation, day-to-day running of the business, and also litigation. So I do go to court with any disputes. And we also do some real estate work as well, but business and growing businesses is my passion.
Awesome. And how did you, the topic we're going to talk about today, right? Measuring employee performance, what's kind of been your experience there? How did you get to a point in your own law firm where this is now something that you want to share with others and help them do?
Well, like I said, I've been a business attorney. So I've helped other businesses and, growing my own business and my own firm, and then now being the COO of Salis Law Firm, I practice what I preach. I'm not an attorney who's all about theories and what happens only in the courtroom.
Okay, so you also have a strong operating agreement, and
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Hey, listen, I've been there. True, real quick side story. Years ago, we, as a marketing company, Spotlight Branding, we started getting better and better at building websites, just our own evolution as a company, right? We just got better at what we do. And I never forget, kind of waking up one morning, looking at our own website and being like, our own website's probably one of the worst websites of all of the websites we've ever done. I really think it's time. So hats off to you, because honestly, it's very easy to not, to not do yourself the advice that you give to others.
Yeah, housekeeping is the most challenging, I have to admit, because we all want to help everybody else, and then when it comes to our own, we're like, oh, we'll do it tomorrow. I'm too tired. Something came up. Someone else needs my help. And we do that naturally. I mean, even in our personal lives, most people don't take the time to take care of themselves. They're always taking care of their family or their friends or someone else. And that's one thing that I always tell people, you have to take care of yourself because you can't pour out of an empty cup.
I agree. And I think, I've had conversations along these lines too. And the thing I've seen, I'm curious to know what you've seen, but I think most people, whether we're talking lawyers or just business owners or managers, I think everyone generally agrees that, I want to measure performance, right? I typically think the harder thing is to kind of figure out how to do it. All right. Well, what's your experience been there? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I do. It is sometimes hard, but if you have, key performance indicators, KPIs, they really are key. Okay. You sit down, you write down, what are the things that you're expecting of your employees? What are the things that you need them to do? And then you have to figure out, well, okay, how do I measure that?
Right. You kind of reverse engineer it, right? You start with the
It-
end in mind and work backwards.
Exactly. And that makes it much more simple and manageable. There are a lot of different key performance indicators. I mean, you can have it from marketing to sales to, attorneys are a little bit easier when you have things like billable hours, but operations, customer retention, financial KPIs, you can have key performance indicators for practically every single employee in your organization and yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. So, let's dive into that, because I think, this is why on this podcast, this is a podcast for lawyers, and our guests are either lawyers themselves or people that work in the space. So I think what I'd love to hear about, and I'm sure the listeners would love to hear, is what are some of the ways you measure performance then, right? Because you've got the same roles in your firm that a lot of other lawyers have. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay, so for instance, for attorneys, let's say, if you are on an hourly billing, you have billable hour requirements per month, per quarter, per year. Those are very easy to measure because if they bill it, then it counts. If they don't bill it, it doesn't count. You can also have number of networking events that they're required to attend on a monthly basis or a yearly basis. You can figure out the number of conversions from lead to client. If you have attorneys that are actually bringing in leads and talking to prospective clients, what are their conversion rates? You can have KPIs for the average time for conversion. How many follow-ups are they doing? Monthly case reviews, those are also key performance indicators. So those types of things would work with attorneys. And the key to the key performance indicators is to actually sit down with those employees and go through them and tell them how you're going to be measuring them, when you're going to be measuring them, what's expected of them, and then follow up with that. On a weekly basis at first, then a monthly basis, then you can do it every quarter. I wouldn't recommend going past every quarter because then people tend to put those things on the back burner, and not keep that, top of mind. So you always have to remind them what the expectations are, and you always have to see whether or not they're meeting them, exceeding them, falling behind.
I agree. We've kind of gone back and forth over time at Spotlight Branding on the time period, and quarterly is kind of where I've landed. I feel like a month in our experience has been a little too short. Only whether it be sales or whatever, it's even as the business owner looking at revenue, sometimes it can be stressful to look at it over the course of a month because in anything there's just ups and downs. But what I found is that for whatever reason, over a 3-month period, you can typically expect most things to level out, right? So whether it's a revenue number, a billable hours number, a sales number, or even, networking events. I love that as a KPI because you know what? 1 month might have less events than another, right? So I think when you extend that period out a little bit longer, it becomes more reasonable to expect those KPIs to be hit consistently.
Exactly. And at first you have to do it, on a weekly and then monthly and then quarterly, because you want everybody to get the hang of it. If you've never had KPIs before, if you've never had those measurements and you don't know what you're doing or what your boss is expecting of you, a quarterly is not going to work, because if you're going to do it wrong from the beginning, it's not going to fix itself.
Right. I think what you're saying is you have to check in, right, on the progress.
Yeah, you check in at the beginning, and then once everybody gets the hang of it and everybody understands what's expected of them, you can go back and take a step back and do it quarterly, because now everybody knows what's going on. Everybody is used to this standard and measurements, and they shouldn't be falling behind. They can monitor themselves because they know what you're expecting of them.
One of the problems I've run into before, and I think some of this is just in communication, but have you ever had a situation where somebody hits their KPI, and to them, they feel like maybe that means they deserve a raise or a promotion. When really, I don't know what your thought is, but my thought is your KPI is your minimum performance standard. Your KPI is your job. If you don't hit your KPI, what that actually means is that you didn't, I don't want to say you failed at your job, right? But like you didn't hit like if a C is a passing grade, you didn't get a C, right? What's your experience been when it actually comes to people's attitudes around hitting their KPI and that type of thing?
Well, you are correct. The KPIs are your minimum standards. So if you don't hit them, you have failed. It is harsh, but it's true. Now, that's why you have to do the check-ins at the beginning to make sure that the employer's KPIs are, attainable, and that the employees can perform them. And you have to make sure that you're giving the right KPI for the right employee. So you can't have a sales KPI for a paralegal, let's say. Paralegals are not there to sell. So that's at the beginning, it is a little bit difficult. I will say that, because you do have to kind of measure and see whether you're right or wrong or what are proper expectations. And once you have that down, they are the minimum. If you don't hit your KPIs, there's a problem.
Something I've tried to do is kind of, because I think you bring up a good point that it can be a little difficult at the beginning. Something I've tried to do is proactively address the attitude that I want them to have. So like what I mean by that is I think KPIs are not only a huge benefit to the manager or the owner, but I think they're a huge benefit to the employee, because what you're actually doing is you're removing subjectivity, right? Like your manager's opinion of you actually doesn't matter that much, because now you have an objective measurement to know if you're doing a good job or not. So I try to present it as like, hey, honestly, guys, this serves you well too, because you have something now that is objective. And yes, it's up to you to a certain degree, figure out how to achieve it. I mean, we're going to give you tools, systems, processes, but I try to spin it as a positive.
It is. That's exactly right. It is definitely a positive for everybody involved, because you don't have the subjectivity. If you and your immediate supervisor don't always get along, it doesn't matter, because you're being measured, your performance is being measured on objective standards, and they are really measurable. It's not a subjective thing of, oh, you hit it, you didn't hit it. We have no idea, but I like you, so you'll pass. You don't have that anymore.
Could you imagine if school was like that? Right? It's interesting because, do you have kids?
I do.
Okay. So I don't. So maybe you can speak this better than me, but it's interesting because I remember growing up being like, what do grades have to do with the real world? And stuff like that. But the truth is, I don't know. I kind of think that maybe school has it right. Well, that's a lofty statement, right? I mean, in terms of to a certain degree, the importance of at some point measuring success or passing, right? There's a lot of conversation to be had out there about, grades and stuff like that. But I actually think in adult life, we've swung the pendulum too far, where we don't have these objective measurements. And so you grow up with pretty concrete measurements of success academically, and then you get out into the real world, and honestly, it mostly your success mostly is based on the opinions of your peers and your managers. And I don't know, I kind of think that's actually a huge negative that isn't being addressed a lot.
Yes, very true. And we do have some success measurements, whether we like it or not. I mean, if you own a business, if you're profitable, now you're being successful. But, the more you break it down and the more you show your employees what they're being measured on and what's expected of them, people will rise to the occasion. Okay. If I know that I have to do A, B, and C, then that's what I'm going to do, A, B, and C.
Yeah, it really crystallizes things.
Exactly. And then when I don't know what is expected of me, then I might get more stressed out. I might not like my job anymore. I might not, because we all want to know that we're being productive. We all want to know that we're doing a good job, that we are contributing. And the way to know that is knowing what we're being measured on and what's expected of us, which is the KPIs.
So we kind of talked about some of the ways to maybe measure, an attorney's performance. How about some other roles that would be in a typical law firm?
Okay. So you have marketing KPIs, for example. With the marketing KPIs, they're a little bit probably easier because you can measure like monthly website traffic. You can measure the conversion rates for the call to action content. You can measure how many blog articles, you're putting out there every month. What are, how much traffic is that blog generating? So all of these things are measured, very objectively. If you have salespeople in your law firm, which some law firms do, you can measure monthly sales growth. You can measure monthly sales for new customers. You can measure monthly sales for previous or current customers, extras. You can measure how many qualified leads that they're bringing in, how much time they're spending on non-paying clients versus paying clients, how much time they're spending on customer service and educating the clients about the services that you offer.
Yeah.
Sales.
I agree. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
One of the things I've found, I'm curious to know what your experience is here, is sometimes it can also be overwhelming to pick from those. And, and I'm thinking about my own feelings. Sometimes I feel like maybe I came up with 7 different things that could be measured, but none of those feel like they're the most important thing, or there's 7 things and I just, have paralysis by analysis, right? And I kind of don't know what to pick. So my experience has been just pick something, anything, start measuring. It's not the worst thing to change somebody's KPI. What are your thoughts about that, kind of how to pick, and, if you're having difficulty choosing?
That goes back to my weekly check-ins and then monthly check-ins, and then you do the quarterly. Once you figure out what are the things that are important to your business, are you measuring them properly? And are you giving the proper baselines for all these, where your expectations of your employees are proper and they're not, too high, that you're not setting them up to fail? Then you can tweak them until you get them right. And then you do your quarterlies, because now you know what's important to you. For every business, lead conversion, where you're getting your leads, are you getting qualified versus unqualified leads? Those are all very important. So a good CRM program is also very important, because it goes hand in hand with the KPIs, because then you can input all of the information and run reports, so you're not inundated every week or quarter of trying to figure out those measurements and where they are and how many, leads you've received and how many this or that. It's all inputted, and you can run your reports and go from there, which also takes out a lot of the subjectivity.
Maybe I'm a little biased because obviously owning a marketing company, marketing KPIs are something that, kind of come naturally to me. But I am thinking back to some conversations I've had with attorneys on this topic. And the sense I get is that the more difficult area to come up with these KPIs is more in the operations side. And we talked about the attorneys earlier, but, creating KPIs for a paralegal, creating KPIs for a receptionist, creating KPIs for anyone in a more administrative role. Do you have any thoughts or advice for those types of roles?
Yeah, well, so you have to see, you can have fulfillment time. So you have KPIs on how fast you have to get back to clients or potential clients. You can have KPIs on follow-ups to potential clients. How many times do you follow up? What's the time frame for the follow-ups? You can have KPIs to see your employee turnover rate, which is for your business, not for the receptionist. But that also gives you
Sure, but that would be like
indication.
a KPI potentially for like a business manager or something like that, or an office manager, if that's, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So those are all operational KPIs. Another one is, how fast do you answer the phone? How many of the calls actually go unanswered? Why? What are the reasons those calls are going unanswered? And the KPIs also help you figure out if people are at their capacity and you need to hire someone else, if there's a break in the process at some point before it gets to that employee. So it helps you measure all of those things.
You just said something that's really smart, and I want to dive into that more. You just made a comment that the KPIs kind of help you see if something's broken in the process, right? And
yes,
there are so many layers to that, because one of the things that I've seen is that also what's interesting is that if people are hitting their KPIs, but the business overall isn't doing as well as it needs to be, that also shows you that maybe your KPIs are broken. So that's why I like to look at this as like an ecosystem. I mean, we got to look at each role in a vacuum in terms of what they need to be measured in. But the question should always be, what do they do that contributes to the bigger picture? So if they don't hit their KPI, the bigger picture suffers. And if you really got your KPIs down, usually you can look where else in your business a KPI might have to be exceeded to make up for it. So like the easy examples in marketing and sales. If marketing has to generate leads and sales has to generate new clients, right? Signed engagement letters, if marketing doesn't hit their KPI, then the only way to overcome that in the short term is that sales has to have a higher conversion rate. They have to do more with less, right? And so exactly. I think you can accomplish that in operations and admin. It's just a little more challenging to see it, but I love the point that when you don't hit a KPI, it shows you maybe where something's going to break elsewhere in your business, or maybe you are hitting KPIs, but other bigger numbers aren't being hit, and maybe that shows you your KPIs are broken. So does that kind of make sense, or what are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, it makes 100% sense, because that's the whole point, is to try to measure everything to make sure that your overall performance and your business is profitable. And so even though everything is in a vacuum, it's like a puzzle. You have to fit all the pieces together. And when people don't get to their KPIs, it's not necessarily that they completely failed at the beginning, obviously, while you're still trying to figure it out, because why did they not hit their KPIs is the operative question. If they're because of their bad performance, then they definitely failed. If it's because there's a break in the process, or they have no way of hitting that KPI because their job, does not lend them to be able to do that, well, now you have to reassess. Can you incorporate it into their job? What is it that you need to do prior to it coming to them to make it easier for them to hit their KPIs? And everything does have to go hand in hand so that you are still profitable at the end.
That's a great point. I mean, I think what we're really saying is that KPIs both help you weed out poor performers whose performance is poor because they're not the right fit for the role. But then it also challenges either you as the owner, or it challenges the manager, and really to a certain degree, it even challenges the employee to see where the processes can be improved in order to make KPIs more achievable. And so I love that yin yang, right? Because, it helps you get rid of the people you need to get rid of, but it also helps you improve the business's procedures where there's opportunity to improve them.
Exactly.
So everyone out there needs to do this.
Yes.
And anyone that listens, I say this in my other episodes, so much of this stuff is like, just get started. Tell your team up front, hey, be prepared over the next year for these to change. But the goal is eventually to settle into something that, won't change, right? If you, with anything in life, if you set expectations up front, you give yourself, more wiggle room and things like that. I want to talk more about about when someone doesn't hit their KPI though, and just kind of your personal experience to that, and kind of how do you handle when someone's not hitting it, and if you've got an example, great. If you don't want to reveal somebody's dark secrets of their performance, that's okay too. But anything you can share to help everyone out there for once they implement this, what they're going to experience when somebody isn't hitting their KPI.
So before we go into that, if you're just starting to do the KPIs, talk to your employees. Okay, see what it is that they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and have them help you figure out what those KPIs should be for their roles.
Yeah, they have buy-in now because they participated in the yeah.
Exactly. So not only do they have buy-in, they participated, they know what to expect, and they can't come back and say, oh, this was not part of my job. This was not in my job description. Well, it was all done together. When people don't hit their KPIs, most of the time there's a break in the process, one way or another. So for example, I had a paralegal was consistently not hitting KPIs. And every time we talked about it, it was, oh, I'm sorry, I'll work harder. I just keep forgetting. Well, come to find out, she was just being pulled in too many different directions. So it really hindered her ability to hit her KPIs within her working hours. And it ended up that we needed to get a receptionist to actually answer the phones so that when she is doing work, she's not being interrupted by a phone ring. We scheduled blocks, so that when she had to do legal drafting or research, she would block off the time so nobody else would interrupt her. And I tell attorneys to do that as well. If you have pleadings or things that you have to do your, block off your time for different things so that, at this time, I'm doing this. At this time, I'm doing this. And everybody else around you also knows, do not disturb.
Yeah, I love that because it's such a great conversation when you can have with your employees, like, hey, how do we improve the process? I'm definitely guilty early on in my business. I was definitely guilty of feeling the burden on me to develop every system, every process, and also be the one to improve it. So I also love what you're describing because it also invites them into the process of improving a process or a system. And I've gotten to the point where I tell new employees from the beginning, hey, this is your measurable, and to a certain degree, it's up to you to figure out how to achieve it. And what I mean by that is not like we give you a blank piece of paper and just figure it out. We've got a system, we've got a process, but it's like saying if the system isn't working, you also need to ask yourself what needs to change, or you need to raise your hand and say, hey, I don't think the process is working anymore. And so I think that, it forces that conversation and it invites them into that process.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, every business is a team, and if everybody works as a team and everybody has the opportunity to speak up, it makes it a lot easier, less stressful, more profitable. And one of the things I always tell employees is I will listen to any suggestion you have. I may not take it or implement it, but I will certainly listen to it and I will explore it. And if it fits and it does make the process better, we will certainly implement it. But if it doesn't because of one reason or another, then we appreciate it. Thank you. But we'll keep the process the way it is, or we might tweak it in a different way. But everybody understands that and feels that they're heard and that they're part of a team, and that they're valuable to the business.
Do you have, how do you kind of determine when it is time to move on from somebody due to them not hitting their performance standard? And is there kind of like a, it's after you don't hit it twice or something like that? Like, how do you approach that decision?
Well, that has to be in your expectations with the employees. You have to let them know. And usually it's like 3 strikes, you're out. Only if it truly is their fault why they didn't hit it. So if there's a break in the process, that doesn't count against them, but if it is really consistently their performance, 3 strikes is it. It's hire, slow, fire, fast kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Because it's hindering when you have someone who doesn't perform, it hinders the rest of the team. Not only with performance, because like you said, if you have marketing's not working, you're not getting enough leads. Now sales has to work harder to try to get the conversions. So their conversions have to be higher, and then it trickles down. So if a person does not perform, it's better for everybody else that you cut them loose.
Yeah, no, I agree. And so that comes back to me. I think that's why I like quarterly. And I think going back to the conversation we had earlier about kind of what period of time, I also want to make it clear to the listeners that there does, I think, need to be an end date to almost like when that measurable gets locked in. Even though all of these things are happening on an ongoing basis, with any goal, because that's what the KPI is. It's a goal. It's a goal that you have to hit, but it's a goal nonetheless. And with any goals, you need to be timed, right? You need to have, you need to achieve this by blank. So I like quarterly because we sit down at the end of the quarter, we talk about their KPIs, and if they didn't hit some, we talk about what we can do different. And then it's kind of like, okay, if a whole 3 months later, you didn't hit those again, now we're starting to have the real conversation of, is it you, and maybe they do get another quarter, maybe they don't. And at that point, if they do, you're talking 9 months of not hitting a KPI, right? So, I think that's long enough for sure.
I think that's too long, actually.
Yeah, no, it might be. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's like the top of the.
When someone doesn't hit their KPI, you don't wait another 3 months. Okay, that means they need shorter time frames and more check-ins. Mm-hmm. So if they're not hitting KPIs because of their performance, then I would do a month. If that month they're still not hitting their KPI, we would talk again and see what the issues are, what we can do. And then you check in again next week. Mm-hmm. Because the longer you go with someone who's not performing, the worse you're going to put yourself, your business, and your other employees in a worse position. So if everybody's hitting their KPIs, do the 3 months. When there's a failure in that process or when there's a break, that means you need to be more diligent and have shorter periods.
I'm going to have my employees listen to this episode so they can realize how nice we are. How nice. No, but you're making a ton of sense.
Yeah, and especially if there's a break in the process, you get a month to try to implement the new process and see whether the new process is now working. If it's not, you need to tweak it again. You don't want to wait 3 months and do something wrong for 3 months. You know, you have to kind of be more proactive. So in business, there's no hard and fast rule. Yeah, it's good to have measurements, it's good to have timelines, but you also have to think on your feet and you have to do what's best for the company and the rest of your employees.
You know, I thought a question that popped in my head, you know, to kind of slightly changing gears a little bit, but obviously on topic. To what degree, if any, are you an advocate of KPIs being public across the team?
I think it's always a good idea to have it public, because, you know, when you want to lose weight, they tell you have someone there, you know, do it with someone else. If you're wanting to go to the gym, have a buddy that's going to go with you, because this way you have someone who's kind of making sure that you're doing what you need to be doing. And if you have KPIs, I mean, look, if you have a sales force and you have a marketing force, the marketing people don't need to see the KPIs for the salespeople and their performance, you know, and vice versa. However, if you have people in the same position and they all have the same KPIs, it's good for them to kind of see and measure themselves as to everybody else. So they can also see that everybody's pulling their weight, everybody's working hard, everybody's working as a team, you know, and it's a very nice flowing process. And
I really agree. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, and you can tell, you know, relationships and even employee relationships, all relationships are never 50-50. You know, there's always times that it's going to be 80-20 on one side, then 80-20 on the other side. And so when you see everybody else's KPIs and you see people are performing and working, when someone falls short, other people will step up to try to help them and rebuild it. You know, and then when people consistently fall short because of lack of performance, other people are not going to stand for it. And that person's going to have to either step up to the plate or leave the firm or business.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, you know, I couldn't agree with you more. And I just think in general, you know, pretty much any company out there, whether it's a law firm or any business, you know, would all agree that, oh, we want collaboration, you know, we want to foster collaboration, you know, and all that stuff. And so if you don't make KPIs public, you're actually kind of undermining part of that, because me knowing how someone else is doing is also invites me to participate in their success. You know, and I agree with what you said earlier about marketing doesn't have to know sales numbers or have to know operations, but my personal suggestion would be to still make that information available, you know, for the same reason, because you never know how one department might have an idea. It can just be just an idea, right? Hey, what if they tried this, you know, and you know, so I think that can be really valuable to, you know, to kind of keep it public as well. And there can be downsides, but I think the upsides outweigh it.
I do too. There's always downsides and upsides to everything, but definitely having KPIs and having them public as in available to people for people to see is definitely a huge upside. And you know, I don't really see many downsides to it.
Yeah, and in some ways, I hate to say this, but the people that have kind of negative reactions to that, like maybe they're kind of telling you something about their fit, right? You know, to be able to kind of handle that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. If you want to foster a collaborative, open communication business, you know, where people feel like they're contributing and they're valuable and they want to do the best that they can, you know, that fosters that as well, because everybody knows what everybody else is doing and you see other people performing well, so you get motivated to perform better. You know, and then you can see the people who are not performing well are getting, you know, talked to, help, or fired. Then you know that you're not picking up other people's slack.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've got one other burning question on this topic I want to ask, and then I want to let you go because I know that you've got a firm to get back to. But one of the things that I've had come up, and I imagine others have or will face this too, sometimes the pushback I've got from employees when given a KPI is this: I don't feel like I have full control over that result. Have you gotten that one before, or some form of it?
Oh, yes. And a lot of KPIs, people don't have full control, but we don't have full control for our lives either. We still live them.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of finding why. Why are you not hitting those targets?
Well, it is, and then that, and look, at Spotlight Branding, if we're talking about any roles that are client facing, it's well, because the client's unresponsive. Not that you ever are, Tanya. I don't know. I haven't asked. But my reaction to that is that's fine. It's your job to figure out how to get them responsive. The example I always come back to is sales, right? No one would ever argue that a KPI for a salesperson should be sales, like the actual sign up of sales. Yeah. But sales is reliant on marketing to generate leads, and sales is also reliant on the person sitting across the table saying yes. Like, it is the ultimate I don't control the outcome measurable, right? So that's kind of I actually think most KPIs, you won't control the full outcome because you will be reliant on other people, whether it's fellow staff or clients or vendors, to give you an answer or a decision that you're looking for. But I think that's actually where the opportunity lies, because if a business is if you're trying to measure like your average case time, which would obviously be a longer KPI, right? But open file to close file, you don't control every component of that, but what you want to do is do everything you possibly can to condense that period of time, right?
Exactly.
So easier said than done, but that I face that a lot, and that's definitely one of the things we combat is, you're not going to control it. But it's your job to figure out, how to accomplish it.
Yes. And, if you have sales, for example, that are not hitting their KPIs because the clients, because of the leads, because of this, you can figure out whether, okay, do we need to change the marketing? Are we not hitting the target audience that we're trying to hit? Do we need to give you more sales training? Are you approaching sales in, I have the resolution to your problem and I can help you? Or are you approaching sales as, oh, let me sell you my products so I can make money? Those are big differences. So training, figuring out the why, all of these things will help alleviate the lack of control and give you more control over your KPIs.
Right. It's like how, right. And I think operations is the harder area. Again, I think, okay, well, I can't control this because I can't, the clients aren't responding. Well, why aren't they responding? Like, isn't that a sign of something? And what do we do about that? So it actually surfaces, challenges that I think make a business better, or that make an employee better, so, well, I'm glad you faced that too.
I think every business faces that.
I just don't think there's many KPIs that you can have full control of. There are some, but but I mean, gosh, even like our writers, their KPI is just getting their writing done on time. But even that can be influenced by whether or not they have their content call with their client.
Right? Yeah.
So. All right, awesome. Well, this was fun. I appreciate you so much hanging out with me. And this topic is so huge, and I think gets overlooked. So I really hope you enjoy this, and I really hope the listeners got value out of it.
Same here. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Awesome. So I want to leave with two things, Tania. So first of all, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your firm or get in touch with you? Or is there any information that you would like people to specifically check out regarding you or your firm?
Sure. Well, we're in the midst of rebranding and having a new website, but you're always welcome to call 954-368-4050. It's Salis Law Firm, PA.
Okay. Do you know what the website address of the new firm is going to be yet?
I think it's going to be the same, salislawfirmpa.com.
Okay.
You can always reach me by email at Tania, Tania, at salislawfirmpa.com as well.
Okay. Awesome. And we'll try to put some of that in the show notes. And then last thing, we ask everybody that's on to end with a piece of advice for our listeners. And the question is, if you could give one single piece of advice to all the lawyers out there, what's that one thing you would tell them?
Organization and blocking your time.
Why? I mean, I agree, but why?
Because, well, that's the only way you're going to be able to get things done. So you block time off for networking, you block time off for marketing, you block time off for actual legal work. You block time off for the employees and reviewing their KPIs. And utilize your calendar. Once it's on your calendar, don't sway from it unless there's an emergency. And then you can have a stressful life because you know you're not missing things. And it will be a lot more organized.
No, you're so right. I think a lot of us, we only put appointments on our calendar, right? But we can also put on our calendar times that we plan to work on certain types of tasks or things. Or man, that's fantastic advice, especially because I talk to a lot of lawyers, and time management is something that comes up a lot. So for those that hung around till the end, man, two really big things today that I think get overlooked: KPIs, and then honestly calendaring. It's a lost art. So Tania, I loved it. I hope we get to hang out again soon. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/centerstage.